Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome on board Flight to Youth 22. We are currently first in line for takeoff and are expected to be on air in approximately 20 seconds' time. We ask that you please fasten your seatbelts at this time and turn off any distractions as your full attention is highly appreciated. Before we begin, let us first correct our niyat lillahi ta'ala and open both our hearts and minds. Thank you for choosing Legends Airline of KESAN. We hope you enjoy your flight.
What do you think of first when I say the word politics? Are you picturing a group of men in expensive suits, not a single hair out of place, sitting along a long table? Men who look perhaps middle aged, some look old enough as if they're about to retire in a few years. You can see a whole head of hair turning silvery white. The room is quiet, the atmosphere is tense. You can see some of the men from the group have their brows furrowed, probably thinking about how to calculate budget estimates or consider whether they should increase taxation or discuss countermeasures for national security or other words that you've never once used in your mundane life before. You're imagining people who occupy a very influential position in a government or even in an international institution who hold so much power and influence, more than you can even imagine. All of them gathering in one single room. You're not wrong. Pull up a picture of a United Nations conference, a meeting, anything, and you will see we are not completely wrong. This is politics. Or is it? If you had an opportunity to study abroad without money being the issue, with full scholarship, financially you are set. Which country and which university would you choose? I'm sure you've thought about this sometime in your life. If not, maybe some of you who are listening at this very moment are going through this predicament. Have you ever wondered if the country and the university you have in your mind right now, that choices, are they political? Is studying political? Is, let's say, that course on world history that maybe you've been eyeing for a while now? Do you think history is political? What about besides education? For instance, traveling. The country you bring your family with to visit for a nice holiday? That choice, do you think it's political? What about the food, the culture? Things like these, can they be political? What about art, like paintings, sculptures, exhibitions, literature, poetry? Can these forms of art be political? Can artistic expression be political? What is politics really? Naturally, the word politics evoke an image of leadership, people in government who have immense power, making decisions for the good of the people or as representatives of the people. But politics can be more subtle than this. I am a student of linguistics, and in linguistics, we describe and study the way languages are used in real life communication. The power of language is more prevalent than you may think. The way you think and perceive the world influences the way you talk and write. Ever heard that saying, the eyes are the windows to your soul? Well, language is the window to your mind. And discourse will always have political undertones, whether we notice it or not. Politics can be subtle. Numerous renowned linguistic scholars have and are still extensively studying this. It is well known in our field of study. Politics is not always about men in suits. Politics is not only for the people that occupy the top parts of the social pyramid. Politics is in the language you use, in the words you use to express your culture and experiences. It is in the words you use in the classroom or in the way you interact with your business partner or customer. It exists in the ever changing social narratives. Politics exists in all forms of art, paintings, literature, poetry. Art is political. This is why artists paint and poets write. The point is, politics is in the very pores of our social existence. Then, why are we so afraid of politics? Why do some of us cower when the conversation we have with our family and friends suddenly becomes political? The other day, I saw a short reel on Instagram about a travel and food influencer. Sorry, a travel and food influencer that goes by the username Girl versus Globe. She had posted a video about how, after being in more than 60 countries, the one she wanted to visit again the most was Palestine. She received backlash for this, and her response is she said, travel is political. Where you travel, how you spend your money, who those money goes to, these are all political acts. You vote with your dollars at home and abroad, and just because you don't understand it, it doesn't mean it's not happening. She goes on to say, you're allowed to unfollow me anytime. She said in her caption, unfollowing is not some great offense. It's important that the accounts you follow bring you value and joy. When they stop doing that, it's time to say goodbye. Nothing wrong with that. Whether you're passionate about empowering women for speaking up about harassment and assault, whether you're passionate about advocating for access for people with different abilities in education or business setting, all these are political opinions, and just because they're political or taboo does not negate the need for these conversations to exist. This shows that sometimes the choices we make can't help but be political, and I'm here to let the rest of you, listeners, know that there is nothing wrong with talking about politics. Welcome to today's episode where we will be discussing politics, leadership, and the importance of youth participation. I am Hannah Najwana from Flight to Youth, a podcast by the youth and for the youth. Talking about politics is a very daunting task. However, to not talk about politics, to not be affected by politics, to not even have to think about politics is a privilege that not a lot of people can afford. A life not affected by politics is a privilege. Let me say this again. To not talk about politics is a privilege. Some individuals identify as apolitical, choosing to refuse and consciously avoid any political affiliations and discussions in the hopes of standing on neutral ground. However, even this stance is a political choice in its own way. Michael Sandel, in his book Justice, What's the Right Thing to Do, he said, when moral reflection turns political, when it asks what laws should govern our collective life, it needs some engagement with the tumult of the city, with the arguments and incidents that roil the public mind. Politics has always been about conversation. It has always been about dialogue, whether one community has more power than the other. This is a different thing because there is no denying how pervasive power struggles are, especially in this context. Regardless, politics in and of itself has always been about conversation, a conversation about what is correct and what is wrong, justice and rights, obligations and consent, honor and virtue, morality and law. There are existing debates about whether it is moral to deliver death sentences or capital punishment for violent crimes, whether a country should accept and integrate asylum seekers into the local society, freedom fighters whose homes are ransacked and brutalized by an occupying force. These debates still exist, and although politics is a daunting subject, as part of a larger community, these issues are a responsibility for us to bring forward. We, even as regular people, have a collective moral obligation to amplify voices of the oppressed. I cannot talk about politics without doing justice and mentioning the people who are currently suffering, our brothers and sisters in Palestine. Today, I think the whole of Brunei agrees that whatever Israel is doing, committing genocide, murdering our men, women, and children, sexually assaulting and harassing adults and young minors, these are methods of intimidation and outright crimes against international law. I want to recite a poem by Karim Wafa al-Husseini, a Palestinian indigenous poet, artist, writer, and speaker who wrote a poem. Let me read it to you now. They ignore the suffering of millions, saying they do not understand it. But I ask them, in what language does a child cry? He references the thousands of children who are murdered in cold blood by the occupier. He is referencing the countless children who are forced to stare into the barrel of a gun. Hearing a child crying triggers such a natural, guttural, and primal response from people, not just from mothers. You do not need to know the child's language or the language of the parents to know that when a child cry, there is something wrong. That when a child cry, they are in pain. Pain do not need a translator. Pain is a universal language. Pain is also for the men and women and elderly people who are suffering from the same fate. The catastrophe happening in Palestine is not a war with two equal entities. This is an annihilation of the Palestinian people, and there is no more appropriate terminology except apartheid and genocide. There are other atrocities happening in other parts of the world and even internally. Our beloved country also requires people to speak up for it. Perhaps our societal struggles are not at the same magnitude as those suffering from genocide, yet they are still important. I do not think we are strangers to the saying, the youth of today are the leaders of tomorrow. So, the next question is, what can we do? I have three main advice, and those will be the main contents for today's episode. These advice are taken from a forum I personally previously attended by IPA, which stands for the ASEAN Interparliamentary Assembly. The three main advice that the guest speakers kept reiterating were to listen, to join mentorships, and to refresh your intentions. Although I am not a professional, I will also attempt to elaborate on each of the points in hopes to make them more digestible to you, the listeners, and also perhaps as a reminder to myself. There is an art to listening. I'm sure you've heard about how to be an active listener. It is more than hearing the sounds coming out of a person's mouth. It is to listen, to see them as a person worth seeing. There is a book by Mikhail Ahmed Smith entitled When Hearing Becomes Listening, Prophetic Listening and How It Can Transform the World Around Us and Around Us. Let me say that again. When Hearing Becomes Listening, Prophetic Listening and How It Can Transform the World Within Us and Around Us. It is a short read. I have yet to obtain a copy myself, but you do not have to hear it from me. A reader of the book posted a review saying that she highly recommends this book to everyone who always hears and wants to be heard. The main topic of the book is communication, and it is prophetic. The opening of the book itself started with the seerah on our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how he reacted to people who came to him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Another critic said, as a new psychotherapist, I love this overlap of deep listening from a prophetic lens and psychology. Would highly recommend to all Muslim mental health professionals. And I personally think the last comment can be extended to all those interested in pursuing a career in politics. One very common argument against involving youth in political discussion is experience, or the lack thereof. This is not only common in the political world, this is also a constant dilemma in other work fields. They say young people, quote, are too inexperienced, unquote. Imagine you are in a conference chamber. You look to the right, then you look to your left. You can't help but notice how the people around you, these politicians, are older than you by years, if not decades. Not to mention the amount of authority these people in government hold for decision making involving the affairs of the state, like holding elections, passing bills, discussing budget. Sometimes, coming from the younger generation, our thoughts and belief may not coincide with people who are older, people who are more experienced and have seen battles, both literally and figuratively, more than we have. This is where mentorship comes in. There are many mentorship programs out there, and we just have to look for them. There are many ways, from joining volunteer groups, student unions, attending forums, and the like. The options are endless. We just have to know where to look. For starters, Instagram is a very resourceful place. Find a cause or two that you're passionate about, something that sparks the fire in you, and hold on to that drive. Start showing up to volunteering campaigns, whether that be about caring for underprivileged students and providing them with resources to education, or about caring for nature and raising awareness about plastic pollution and climate change. There is always something for everyone to fight for. Our participation as young people can bring about significant changes with our fresh perspectives and energy. Indeed, the participation of youth in politics is essential. We represent the future, and our voices, no matter how small, need to be heard. The last advice particularly applies to the Muslims listening today, though, perhaps even if you have a different faith, intention, or in other words, purpose. Intention or purpose is an important aspect of human life. What is your purpose in joining these volunteering campaigns? Why do you want to help people? Why do you want to amplify the voices of the Palestinians? Why do you want to help single mothers or single fathers? Why do you want to help the orphans? Why do you want to help? I'm sure you have the answers to these questions yourself. I'm sure there is something deep down in your heart and soul that answer to these questions like some kind of calling. Remember that. Remember this feeling. The last advice is to always renew your intentions or your purpose before, during, and after. In Islam, the acceptance of our actions is judged by the intention behind it. So if you feel like giving charity only to show other people your wealth, refresh your intentions. Reflect on your purpose again. That's some advice for all of our young listeners out there. Remember, your voice matters and can make a difference. You hold power the same way the people who are huddled inside a conference hall, who are discussing about your life maybe at this very moment, hold power. So, use your voice. That brings us to the end of today's episode. The three main takeaways are, if you want to start, your political career and don't know where to begin, are these: master the art of listening, engage with your community, and build your social network. And then the last one is hold on to your purpose. Tune in next time as we continue to explore other interesting topics. Goodbye and stay safe.